Hi, I'm Penny Hutcheson, and this is Coffee Chat. It's a time for me to get together with friends and acquaintances, share a cup of coffee and my favorite mug, and chat about a variety of subjects. Grab your favorite mug, cup, or glass, fill it with your beverage of choice, and listen in. Thanks for joining us. And today's guest is the fruit of my loins, my eldest spawn, Rachel Hutcheson.
Hello.
Long time no talk to.
Oh,
actually.
yes. It's been a full 3 hours since we've talked.
So before we get started on the meaty topic for today, I have an icebreaker question for you.
Okay, I'm ready.
So if you could be any supernatural being, what would you be and why?
Well, I don't think witches, do witches count?
It's up to you. I guess you get to define supernatural. No, they shouldn't count because we
know need something
witches.
super way out there. All right. It may be cliche, but I like dragons. I'm going to go with dragons. Dragons can eat the people they don't like, and they're magical and can fly and do all sorts of awesome stuff and live for thousands of years. And the only occasional people who want to bother them are knights, and they tend to have things for them go poorly. So I'm going with knights.
Okay.
Going with dragons.
That little streak of violence
yes.
I'm so familiar with.
Just a tiny bit.
Yeah.
Millennials are very, very angry people.
And that brings us to our topic for today. So, I'm a boomer, as you know, and you're a millennial.
Oh, yeah.
As I know.
Big divide between the two of us.
Yes. And we've managed to keep from basically hurting each other too badly. So I want to talk about that because that seems to be something that a lot of people are struggling with.
Oh, yeah.
So now I try not to be the stereotypical boomer. Do you think you are a stereotypical millennial?
I think that depends on who you ask. So someone who's a little bit more, say, aggressive towards millennials might see me and my whole thing about caring about other people and voting Bernie Sanders and all sorts of things like that as, oh yeah, stereotypical millennial, stereotypical. Like, one glance down my Facebook feed shows me that the stereotypical boomer is not a fan of me, and they'd include me in that, I think. But
so
I like to think I'm different.
How do you think you're different? Give me an idea, because we even say, I'm a boomer, you're a millennial, but we don't represent a whole generation.
Yes, this is very true.
So we are who we are. So how do you think you're potentially different from other millennials? Where would you maybe disagree with?
Well, that's hard because, like you said, we have our own personal experiences with millennials. So I have myself, and then I have my friends who are millennials. And so within the seemingly stereotypical millennial grouping, maybe I'm a little bit less angry occasionally with boomer, and I understand where the anger towards boomers is coming from, and I think it's legitimate a lot of the time, the complaints they have. Generally speaking, I work really hard to keep my anger a little bit low, even if it's justified on that. So I think that might be how I'm a little bit different.
So why are millennials angry with boomers?
Well, when you look at where millennials are in the world right now, our world has changed a huge amount since boomers were around, and we have all these things that we're struggling with. Cost of living has gone up. Our income has stagnated. We're struggling to meet the same achievement level that boomers had, buying a house, getting married, all of the typical things we were told would happen at this specific general time throughout our life. And so we have all these unique sort of struggles that are going on. And meanwhile, we have boomers who, when they do give advice, it tends to be, in my experience, it tends to be things that don't really work that way anymore. So they may say, well, why don't you, to get a better job, you just need to go around and knock on doors and talk to the people and go in there and hand your resume. But that's just not how the world works anymore. They expect you to go online and submit your application, and going in and, in a way, harassing them into trying to have them give you a job is something that will turn them off to hiring you. And so when we attempt to explain these things to boomers, a lot of times the reaction is, well, you're young and you just don't get it. And so our reaction has been, I feel, a justified sort of anger at that, because we're having these struggles and we're having them generally just sort of dismissed as if this is an element of our age, when in fact we're adults now. We're in our 30s and 40s. You know, we have debt, we have families, we're married, we're not young teenagers anymore. So being treated like young teenagers who have no experience with the world is, we feel, very disrespectful.
So what's the most boomerish thing I've ever said or done to you?
Wow. Occasionally, you do really well.
But
what was, when I think it was when I was younger and in college, and I was having a disagreement, I think, with a professor, and you were like, just go in and say something, or go up the ladder and talk, but that just felt a little bit like, I really, really need this, and I can't fail it, and I'd be thrown out a bit.
I'm surprised you didn't point out the fact that when you were probably late teens and started actually knowing things that I didn't know.
Oh, that's right. Okay, no, that's a better answer.
That's very boomerish.
It hit.
So for our audience,
Yes.
Rachel hit a certain age where all of a sudden there were things she knew that I didn't know, maybe animal facts or statistics or something, and she would say this fact, and I would say, well, that's not true.
That's not true.
And I'd make her prove it.
And I would prove
So
it.
she would prove it over and over and over again.
I had the entire internet on
Yeah,
my side. That's what it is.
Probably took me years to finally go, she knows stuff. And I know for me, there is something really uncomfortable about that point when your child may know things that you don't know. Because obviously when you were born, I knew everything and
Yes.
you knew nothing.
Yes.
And you have that advantage for so long over your children. It just seems natural. But then that point comes when, like you said, it's a passing of the baton almost. But I struggled with it with you, and I wonder, it seems like that could be some of the things with the boomers.
Yes.
Is that it's very difficult to, like, to you, you're like, we're in our 30s or 40s. Well, in my head, it's like, you're the kids.
Yes.
Because part of it is, as old as I get, I don't think of myself as old. So I sort of think of myself as in my 30s or 40s as an adult. So you're the generation below me. That puts you as, you're the kids, right?
Yes.
And so it is kind of difficult, I think, to number one, accept that the kids know more than we do now, and to accept that we've gotten old and really, in some ways, aren't up to date on what's going on.
Yeah.
I think that's hard. And for me, one of the hardest things was to recognize some of my decisions, or at least my generation's decisions, have maybe not been so good for the country, definitely for the world.
Right.
And I think that's a tough pill to swallow, too.
Yeah.
It's better to say just that you guys
Yes.
killed everything, like
Yes.
restaurants and malls.
Restaurants, diamonds, malls, the bookstores. I think condiments, pet food. We've killed off a lot of industries. That's been our entire plan the entire time, has been to kill off everything we're in.
Yes.
But I think it's also difficult, too, from what I've seen with boomers. You're watching, essentially, not just in your personal life, kids moving, people who were kids to you, moving up. You're watching society as a whole shift to the next generation. So you're not only losing something personal in your life, you're losing something at a societal level as boomers begin to pass away and millennials are moving up and starting to enter politics and taking over bigger jobs. And so you're watching all of these elements slip away in society that previously were under your control.
Yeah.
And I think that's got to be hard too. It's natural because that happens with every single generation, but it's still difficult to see, and I think boomers are really struggling with that right now, at least from what I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there are a lot of ways, just little subtle ways. So for instance, the whole tattoo thing, I find that interesting. Back in the day,
Yes.
when we walked to school uphill both ways with hot potatoes in our pockets to keep our hands warm, you did not get tattoos. There was a certain kind of person that got a tattoo. And now it's not a big deal. A lot of people have tattoos. I know recently you've had some older people just really warn you against getting too many tattoos because you're so pretty now and you don't want to mark that all up.
Keep your skin clean and look reputable. And
how does that make you feel when they talk to you like that?
I interestingly enough, I wasn't even mad. I just felt kind of sort of like, oh, because you're still of the previous generation where these tattoos were this big, huge thing that only a certain kind of people had. And now it's, most of my friends have tattoos, the people I've worked with have tattoos. Tattoos just aren't that big of a deal anymore. I know there's still times when we struggle societally with openly having tattoos on us, but generally speaking, that's a minority, and generally it comes from more boomerish generations. And since those are sort of starting to slide away in hiring policies and stuff that, it means it's getting easier and easier and more common to have tattoos as time goes by.
Yeah, I've seen that at work. There was a time where you wouldn't have a tattoo. But now, I mean, the reality is, if you want to hire the next generation, and you do because boomers are retiring or have retired, your generation does demand certain things because certain things are more important to them.
Right.
So, see, now tattoos are very common. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
People want to, I think these are good things that your generation has brought. Your generation tends to want meaning in their work. They're not just working for a paycheck.
Yeah,
they
I'd agree.
really want to make a difference in the world.
Yeah.
And again, I'm making blanket statements because, certainly there are selfish, egotistical millennials in the same way that there are selfish, egotistical boomers. That's true of every generation.
Well, and there are millennials who are practical about it, so maybe their passion is something they volunteer for, and so a job really can just be a paycheck. But I do agree with you. I think generally millennials do really want a little bit more meaning in what they're doing for a living. Yeah. And we struggle because those doors are often closed to us, so we may want a job in which we find a whole lot, and you see this a lot with job hopping, either because we're struggling to actually make a living at that job, or it's just not fulfilling us. We hop jobs way more, but I think it's because we're looking for meaning, and so a job that doesn't provide meaning really is just a job, and if there's a better one off over there, we may as well go find it. And
well,
keep
I
trying.
think your generation also learned as at a certain point, corporations were no longer loyal to their employees either.
Yes.
So there was a time when people did go to a company and stay there for their whole career.
Right.
But it wasn't just the millennials that changed that. Corporations started realizing it's really, we have a day-to-day agreement.
Right.
I will work for you today, and I may quit tomorrow, and I will work for you today, and you may fire me tomorrow or lay me off. So I think that's fair. So what advice, we have managed to work our way through this. I think I've learned a lot from you.
And I've learned a lot from you.
And this is something I think that we could learn from each other.
Right.
So what advice do you have to millennials who are struggling with some of their boomer friends, family, relatives, whatever?
My first advice might be, your anger is legitimate. So if you're being disrespected, it's not wrong to be hurt by that. If you're being talked down to or condescended to, or, oh, your struggles are nothing. I walked uphill to school both ways, and I bought a house at 25 type thing. Yeah. It's legitimate to be hurt by that. So your first thing is accept that this is hurtful and that these people who who say they care about you, but are just sort of being rude and disrespecting you. So your hurt is legitimate. That's the first thing. And the second thing is figure out not which boomers are worth saving, technically, because that's not what it is, but figure out which boomers are open to learning. Because that was your thing. I've talked to a lot of boomers, and some of them are very closed off. I could talk to them all day long about things I know or my experiences, and it's not going to sink in. With you, the big thing was, to go back to our example earlier, when I told you about something and you didn't believe it, and I produced proof, your big thing was you were willing to admit you were wrong.
Yeah.
That's a very important quality. So figure out which boomers are open to learning and seeing that they might be wrong on something. Now, in response, you have to be open to being wrong sometimes too, and you are. Everybody's wrong at some point, but the key is being open to it. So find those people that you drive with, the boomers that are open to being wrong and are willing to learn. Don't spend your energy on boomers that are closed off. You're not going to get anywhere with that, and it's just going to expend energy you don't need to expend, and you're just going to be hurt further. So I would say sort of let the ruder boomers kind of roll off your back and let yourself be angry, but don't spend time trying to change them, because it's not going to work. Just do your best to go find someone else if you can and live your life without letting those people hurt you.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And I think it leads to what I would tell boomers, which is be open. You know, we want to be lifelong learners. It's good for your brain. It's good for your happiness to have these relationships. And I find the relationships I have with young people, because it's not just you.
Yes.
I actually have other millennial people I interact with. It's energizing. It is challenging. But I find that that's a big part of, I think, what keeps you young-minded is to experience things through somebody else's eyes. I mean, the happiest thing is that first time you take your small child to Disneyland or Disney World. That is just the most wonderful thing. And there's nothing like that first time, because you're seeing this thing through their eyes.
Yes.
And it is different. It is different. So I think you can get the same thing by having relationships with people of very different ages. If you get yourself into, you know, a situation where you're only talking to people that think the same as you and agree with you, you miss so much and you don't grow very much. And I think it's important for all of us to keep growing.
And it's mutual growth. If you find the people of either generation that are open to listening and learning and talking, and that was our other key. Our rule is we're never mean to each other. So even when we disagreed on things, as we were working through it, we were never mean. You and I never disrespected each other or were rude to each other. And on the occasions where one of us felt hurt, we were able to come to the other person and say, I was feeling really hurt by what you said earlier. And so that was one of the keys. You can grow talking to other people outside of your normal wheelhouse. I have boomers in my friends, much like you have millennials in your friend circle. I have boomers in my friend circle, and generally speaking, they're very supportive and positive. And even when we disagree, we're respectful of each other and we learn from each other.
Yeah, I think that's important. And what's funny is, as we talk about this, these are all just rules for getting along and having good relationships.
It's
period.
Amazing, isn't it?
Good communication. Be open-minded. Don't just shut the other person down. This is, guess what? It's not just millennials and boomers.
Yes.
It's millennials and millennials. It's boomers to boomers. It's all of us to Gen X and Gen Z. And so it's just people.
Yeah.
It's just getting along with people.
Follow the rules of Mr. Rogers, and I think that we will have a lot happier, we'll have a lot better relationships across all generations if we could all just follow those general rules.
And I think, what can we add to that? Nothing.
Nothing.
Thank you for coming and talking to me.
Thank you.